Well, my name is Mary Messerly, and on behalf of our co-president, Kirsten Lancer, we'd like to welcome you to tonight's branch meeting. And also, welcome to 2021. As we all know, 2020 was a very difficult year as the pandemic raged, and we thought that things could not get worse. And then January 6th happened. America and the world watched in shock and disbelief as our nation's capital was breached and our lawmakers were in harm's way. It was unimaginable and unforgettable. Our democracy, our free elections, and our Constitution was under siege. It was frightening by all accounts. And several hours later, our brave Congress reconvened and carried out its constitutional duty to certify a free election. Our democracy was assaulted last Wednesday, and we responded with resilience, carrying out the will of the people. It is expected that those anarchists will return and our democracy will again rise up to persevere. After all, we are proud Americans and women, guided by our democratic values, our principles, and our Constitution. We will never be yielding to the anarchists, to the hate, and to the lawlessness. All of us can take pride today that our democracy is alive and well and works. And now let us move us forward to tonight's agenda. There are a couple of things that I would just like to note from our recent board meeting. First of all, as you saw on one of the slides tonight, that the state AAUW meeting will be meeting virtually. It will be April 23rd and 24th. It will be free, and so there will be more information as more planning gets underway. Also, last month, we had our first Jingle and Mingle. If you missed that, it was quite a celebratory event, having everyone get into the spirit for the holidays. It was really a hoot, I might say. Next is just a very, very quick orientation. It's been a couple of months since we've met on Zoom. So just as an FYI, those of you that have a laptop or another device that you're using, oftentimes at the bottom of the screen, there is a toolbar and there's a chat feature. Now, after our speaker ends her presentation tonight, we will have an opportunity to ask questions. But I encourage you, during her presentation, you may go to the chat room and you can indicate your question. Lisa will be taking care of our questions tonight, our program chair. So at the conclusion of the speaker, our speaker will be able to take any questions that have been posted in the chat room. All of you have been muted, and you will actually stay muted just in the event of any background noise might create any interruptions. As one of the slides also indicated, we have launched our fundraising task force, which is very, very exciting. And now I'm going to turn it over to Linda Pellew and to ask her to please give us an update of how is that going, Linda?
Okay, bye. Okay, folks, I just got another phone call. We'll have another member. We will have another member join us, okay? Can you hear me? Okay. So anyway, I got another phone call, so we're good here. My purpose tonight is just to let you know that somebody else is joining us, and secondly, to give a little update on the fundraising task force. As you all know, we have lost the opportunity to have our major fundraisers, which of course are the author's tea and the style show. So this summer and again this winter, we have met different groups, discussing how we can address the deficits that we're going to have. So what I'm going to share with you are just some of the decisions that have been made, so you have an idea of the direction that we are going. First of all, I want to assure you that we have the money to support this year's fundings of scholarships at the national and state level. That was money raised last year. Our current plan is raising money for next year, which is 2021, 2022. We've decided on a few things. The overall theme of this campaign will be invest in our future. And as we have said in the past, shares is going to be the umbrella placeholder for all local scholarships. So as I described to you what our intentions are going to be, you can kind of see that money that we will earn from those. Joan Usselman, ladies.
Call from Joan.
Linda, I can call her back. This is Becca.
Okay.
Okay.
Joan, I'll call you back. I'll call her back. Sorry about that. A lot of confusion. It got late. Okay, so first of all, the theme is going to be invest in the future. We're going to do three things. We're going to have a business partnership with Shady Lane Greenhouse, and that will take an effect shortly. 25% of all of the sales made at Shady Lane Greenhouse by family, friends, and members, 25% of the sales will come back to us. So, you'll get more information on that. Secondly, shares program will be expanded throughout the year. And we have a group of people who will work on that. I mean, these things aren't fine-tuned yet, but this is just the direction we're going. And then the third one is plans are being made to sponsor a branch walk event as a fundraiser, and that will likely happen in June. So what more detail will be forthcoming on all of these ideas? Please connect with me. I'm the chair of the committee. If you are interested in joining this new adventure, how to support our local and national scholarships by fundraising in a different way than we have in the past, because we all know that we have to keep the funding level up if we want to consider supporting these endeavors. So I am going to let it go at that and give Joan Usselman a call. Is that okay, Mary?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I got interrupted.
Thank you so much, the dynamic Linda there. I have every reason to believe Linda is doing a great job on the fundraising. I expect that those were donation calls that were coming in because Linda is doing such a phenomenal job. So next on the agenda, we'd like to hear from Terry Mitchell and the out and about. What's going on with the out and about, Terry?
I'm good. Am I
All right.
speaking?
Yes, you are. We can hear you very well. Go for it.
Okay. All right. So the good news is that next month we have an out and about inside, and it's called Notorious RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the life and times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is a virtual tour, and we're having this tour at the Illinois Holocaust Museum exhibit. And this is going to be on Friday, February 19th at 2 p.m. And you'll be in the comfort of your home, and you will be given the link to Zoom into the exhibit. And the cost is $10 per person. And you will have to send me a check and make it out to me because I'm paying the museum. And that information will be in the postgraduate. There'll be a sign-up sheet, and you can just cut off the bottom and mail in your name and your check to me. And that'll do it. Now, this exhibit is based on the New York Times best-selling book, the same name, Notorious RBG, The Life and Times of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it's an exploration of Justice Ginsburg's life and her numerous, often simultaneous roles as a student, wife, mother, lawyer, judge, woman rights pioneer, and internet phenomenon. I just think that it's a very special opportunity. This is the first time such an exhibit has been put on. And it will be, it includes a video presentation featuring the chief curator of collections and exhibitions. And there are briefs and other writings by RBG, including some of her famously searing dissents. And in the exhibit, you will, the various galleries will be shown to us on this video. It's looks to be really a fascinating event. And I don't think you want to miss this. So please look for this sign-up sheet in the postgraduate. Actually, I think last Friday there was a notice that was sent out, and you could actually on that email you can get the link or the sign-up sheet if you follow the directions on that email. So one way or another, and if you have any questions at all, you can call me or email me, Terry Mitchell. And I think we're excited that we're having a out and about inside tour. And I'm going to talk about a couple of future things that we have also. In March, the plan is to offer a virtual class through the Village Cheese Shop in Wauwatosa. This is like a class that will highlight the important role women play in making wine and cheese. The best part is that you will be provided with samples of cheese and wine, and either you can pick them up or they will be delivered to you. So that's what's planned for March. And of course, stay tuned for details on that. A strange coincidence. And then in April, what we've been planning is by the Reads Committee of our branch. We have asked members to join together in reading Jodi Picoult's book called Small Great Things. And it involves the issues of white privilege, racism, and white supremacy. I've read the book and I can tell you it is really well written and it is a really good book. The committee will be planning a virtual event which also addresses aspects of these themes. And our April branch meeting will feature Ginny Finn, the CEO of YWCA, talking about racism. So there is a common theme that we're dealing with in April. And for May, the Garden Club and the Out and About Committee are joining forces in planning a trip to the Linden Sculpture Gardens. And June, we plan to tour Havenwood State Forest in Milwaukee. This was actually planned for last year, and that had to be canceled because of the pandemic. So the word is that it's a really interesting place with very unique history. There are 6 miles of trails and numerous habitats to explore. So it looks like the future for out and about inside is bright and attractive, and we have lots to look forward to. There's only one more item, and that is that in addition to the information that you get through the postgraduate and other communications from our branch, all members will receive an invitation by Punch Bowl for these coming events. So stay tuned.
Terry, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive report. There's a lot of exciting things that we have to look forward to this spring. So thank you very much for your leadership and to putting all those together. Marge Williams, we have a public policy update. What's going on public policy?
Well, public policy, let's see. Next month is an exciting month for us because we are going to have our delayed 19th Amendment celebration. And our speaker for that evening is Helen Bannon. She's going to do a reenactment of one of the women suffragettes. So just a short announcement tonight. What we would like to do, just to kind of be festive, because we can't do cake and we can't do games and things like we maybe would have done, if we were meeting in person. But we'd like to suggest that you dress up as a suffragette, wearing the colors of white and gold and purple. Maybe you have a fun hat that you could be wearing for that night. Maybe you could make a banner. And I know that one of our co-presidents ordered a special costume, and she's going to be wearing that finally. She's been just dying to get that on. The other thing that I was going to suggest is, depending on how comfortable you are with Zoom, you can create a background, and you could find a picture like on Google Images of a suffragette activity or whatever, and you could actually save that picture and then pull it into your Zoom for a Zoom background. So if you know how to do Zoom backgrounds, you might do that. And if not, you could design a flag or a banner, and you could have that with you on our evening. So those are just a few suggestions to help make our celebration, bring it to life a little bit more, and kind of support the 19th Amendment and our reenactment of Jesse Jack Hooper. Also, just Vicki's going to be posting some things on the website about the suffragette movement. There are some great websites with even some videos on all the women that were really important to Wisconsin. And of course, it is important to Wisconsin because we were the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. So we'll look forward to seeing everybody in February.
Marge, thank you so much. You do such an outstanding job, always keeping us dialed in, plugged in, and getting us the information of what we need to do. So thank you very much. So tonight, before I introduce Pat Ryerson to introduce our featured speaker, our public policy that supports our presentation tonight is a increased support for and protection of programs that meet the needs of girls and women in education, including a strong promotion of science, technology, engineering, and math, when we know that that's commonly referred to as STEM education. So Pat Ryerson has been working with the dean for quite some time, and also her administrative assistant. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat. Pat, would you like to introduce tonight's featured speaker?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, all. I am more than pleased to represent your AAUW program committee tonight by introducing our presenter, and I'm going to work on her name, and I have permission to shorten it, but it's Dr. Marija Gajdardziska-Josifovska. Ellen Kowalczyk, her main person, has been so helpful in trying to help me to say this, but she also let me know that that she is known as Dr. G.J. So from here on out, it's going to be, I'm introducing Dr. G.J. She's known this by her staff and around UWM. Dr. G.J. was chosen in 2014 as the Dean of the Graduate School, and she was the first female to hold this position. Where is she the Dean of the Graduate School? At the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She is also a research active and entrepreneurial professor of physics at UWM. In addition, Dr. G.J. is the co-founder of a high-tech startup company, Conovate. Her research has resulted thus far in obtaining one patent. This patent addresses semiconducting materials, which can improve the performance of lithium-ion batteries by improving battery life and storage in electronic devices, something we all could use, including cars, of course. Her second patent application of 100+ pages, guess what? It was due today. Yes, today. She's been quite busy. She's a native of Macedonia and obtained her PhD from Arizona State in 1987. She's been a professor at UWM since 1991. In 2019, she was selected by Milwaukee's Discovery World to be featured in an exhibit called The Heroes of Science Gallery. There are many details available about that exhibit, and it started in 2019 in November, and I talked to Discovery World today and just confirmed that Discovery World is closed. My understanding is they can allow 10 people in the whole building, and until the city says they can open in a different way, they will not be open. But anyway, she was featured among the many, many excellent scientists in this exhibit at Discovery World, and it's also part of Discovery World's STEM and Girls program. I'm going to close my introduction, though, because there's so many, many degrees and things and papers and research I could share about her. But the human part of it from a female standpoint is this caring and capable woman with two statements that she made. Quote, "I've always felt that scientists are portrayed by the media in the most erroneous ways." She continues on to say, "We're either Mr. Goofball or Dr. Evil, and nobody in between." I think a scientist is someone who, she gets excited when there is no answer to a question, and I point out, yet, rather than being scared or disappointed. She's looking for the answer. And second, and I speak here personally, is the only female in the physics class that I went to in high school. In physics, the science we work with is genderless. I was lucky to grow up in a place where nobody told me that physics was just for boys. Dr. G.J., welcome.
Thank you so much, Pat. And thank you for your patience to set up this. I know we were planning on April, and it's today, and it's like, no matter what other deadlines are happening, I'm here, and I'm really, really excited to be here with you. Being a physicist, it's a second nature to prepare a PowerPoint slide. I was trying to do a talk, and I'm sure I can without PowerPoints, but not so long ago, something happened in my family, and I was looking for some old pictures, and then took pictures on my cell phone from these old black and whites. And I was like, okay, maybe I can use those to try and answer the 3 questions that you posed to me, Pat. And thank you for the great introduction. I'm going to share my screen. I think we tried that before. And let me see, I'm going to go into screen mode, and I'll try to go in and out depending how it goes. But I think you can see me on the side, right? So you can still see me even though we have the, okay. So we have a title, but it really is about women in STEM and at universities, in entrepreneurship, in the STEM life, in whatever, in any form or shape. And Pat already talked about my titles. I have to tell you that when I received your newsletter, I called my co-founder, who is also another woman in physics, and I was like, Carol, look at this. And I put this on the screen and I said, look at me, I'm on the first page with the official portrait thing we're trying to put on our website. And look, my idol, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is also in there. And she couldn't believe it. She also, we both have watched the documentary when Ruth was alive, and of course, like many others, were very, very saddened by her death. And one thing that I know that how she expressed her womanness is by adding to this very prescribed, very kind of formal classical robe that you wear as a Supreme Court Justice. She would always put her signature by wearing a very special collar. And then with time, people started to send her some, and she had a whole collection from South Africa of the Zulu style, which is what I'm wearing tonight to honor the incredible RBG. And I am MGJ, that's how people call me at UWM, thanks to my really long and difficult last name. So Pat said, answer me these questions 3. I added that phraseology, we all know that one. How can more women get into STEM fields? What can we at AAUW do to help with getting more women to follow this path? And what was my experience on that journey? What made me want to follow that path? And, one can spend more than a whole hour talking about any of those 3 questions. So what I decided to do today is to try and give you a bit of the journey, kind of stick to the human side of it. And while I'm doing that, to answer the other 2 questions together, to kind of commingle them. So let's see if it works. Hopefully it does. So, and I also cut and paste from, for example, my interview for the deanship and from some talks I've given to women graduate students or to women faculty at UWM. So my higher education, this being a club of university women, I'm going to talk later about K-12, but of course here it starts with my bachelor's in science. It was obtained at the University St. Cyril and Methodius, and those are the 2 scholars who invented the Cyrillic alphabet and brought Christianity to the Slavic group of the most recent barbarians, like what was it, 6th, 7th, 8th century of when that was happening. So a very scholarly name for a university. I did my undergraduate research experience in Grenoble, France at the University of Joseph Fourier, a very famous French mathematician. I'm using his math daily in my lab. I'm doing Fourier transforms all the time. And I did my master's at the Sydney University, and that's the first university in Australia, that's their Harvard, and did my PhD at Arizona State University. All of this was in physics. Leadership, I guess I'm missing something that was supposed to come later. So I started as chair of the physics department, which you would think rather unusual because I was the first woman ever to join the department. And so when I got my promotions to associate and full professor, and immediately after my first sabbatical, I went from being the baby of the department to suddenly being asked to do all these leadership roles. And because my colleagues were the Sputnik generation, they all retired en masse. We went from 22 down to 13 faculty. And right now I'm the most senior member of my department. So I had to choose to either leave, because many people thought you cannot have a career if your department becomes half in size, or to stay and rebuild, and I stayed to rebuild. Then I became a director of an interdisciplinary laboratory for surface studies made of physicists, chemists, and engineers. And I've always been very interdisciplinary in my approach to everything I do. And that lab, which was a world renowned, and I came here as a graduate student to an international conference that was organized by that lab, was supposed to be in China, Tiananmen happened, and it is a conference that happens every 4 years, like the Olympics. And Milwaukee was so well known in this area of interdisciplinary physical sciences, what happens at surfaces of crystals, at surfaces of solids, that Milwaukee held that international conference. So I came here as a graduate student to present my first really interesting discoveries that I made in Arizona. I became associate dean for the natural sciences. Then, in addition to the physicists and chemists, I learned everything that is to know or more, even the closed door stories about good and bad things in biology, in math, and in geoscience. And I had the honors college and all the pre-med programs, and the field house, and so forth, a whole bunch of things. And the freshwater lab at that time was not a school. It was really interesting, loved to learn more. Then I became associate dean of the graduate school, in charge of students, programs, and all research for 6 of the 12 schools and colleges at the university that have graduate education. And most recently, and now for quite a while, I'm actually entering my 8th year as the dean of the graduate school. I used my last sabbatical to go to Oxford for my science, and that was a long time ago in 2009, and to go to Harvard to complete a program on leadership and management in higher education. And you already heard that I guess I'm always looking for new exciting things to do. And I figured out that we had such an amazing discovery in my lab, and we patented that, and we thought that the university will do a tech transfer, but it's so new. We discovered the first form of carbon monoxide, that gas that we all have a sensor in our houses, and we have to change the batteries when they beep. So we discovered and carbon monoxide, CO, can become solid below minus 377 Fahrenheit. So for all practical purposes, cannot exist on our planet in a solid form, and unless you do something very special in lab. So we discovered in 2 dimensions the first solid form of carbon monoxide. We named it graphene monoxide. That's another thing of discoveries. You get to name things. Like when you give birth to a child, you get to name the child. That's so special. So we figured out that with my colleague, Carol Hirschmugel, that unless we roll up our sleeves and start a company, this thing will remain a publication and a patent, but will not make it into the real world. And that's what we're doing. So that's the entrepreneurial part. Now, I'm a scientist, but really very much deep down inside a humanistic scientist. I think without art and without literature, science cannot provide all the beauty, no matter how beautiful it is to me. So I read books all the time, and I listen to music all the time. I go to museums. Louis Pasteur said, chance favors the prepared mind, and that has been my motto in doing science. I'm always doing planned research, but when something happens by chance, oh my God, I'm so ready to jump at it and pursue it. You don't want to close your eyes when nature opens a curtain and shows you something. You want to really look and try and figure out what it is. And I, of course, am informed by data as any other scientist who loves numbers, but I'm always guided by principles. So this is a picture of me as a baby. I'm the second of 2 girls in my family, and my sister, being the older one, has a whole album of her baby picture. Me being the second one, I have 2 pictures, this one and another one when my sister is holding me. So a child is born, and we women are the ones who do the big labor of that, and a child is named, and I'm going to start with that. So my baby pillow actually was embroidered with a hunter before I was born. They had a name ready for me. It was Demetrius, my grandfather's name. My older sister was Katerina, named after my grandmother. And then I was born a girl. There was no ultrasound in 1958. I just turned 62. So for my father's second daughter, his colleagues were teasing him that he needs to open a ballet school. You know how things were at that time. For my grandfather, his third granddaughter, who will carry the family name, who will do the boy activities with grandpa and with dad. And of course, I think I will tell you that The one thing my mother never forgave my father is that he apparently never made it to the hospital to see me. At that time, men were not allowed in the birthing room, but they of course came to see their baby and their wife. And so then at every time I achieved something, she always told him, and you did not come to the hospital. But my father loved me and my mother. And so that story became part of my narrative of being that woman when I was supposed to be a man and being in all these fields where I'm not supposed to be there. So my mother and father, all the grandparents' name being used up, and my maternal grandmother forbid a grandchild to be named after her. She was into science fiction and none of that traditional stuff. And so my parents were into movies, and they had an Italian movie star and a Swedish movie star. Those were the names for me, Silvana or Irena. And then my father did a smart thing, and he was free to choose and go and sign me up. And he came back and they were like, okay, which one did you pick? And he said, well, it's Maria. He named me after his oldest sister who died during the Second World War. And then that Maria being my grandfather's first child, first daughter. So my father and my grandfather decided to stop waiting for that boy in the family, and they made me their boy. So they took me everywhere where all their friends were taking their sons and grandsons. And it was really interesting because, of course, they took me to their friends or to family members, and especially the friends. It was interesting. They accepted me, they respected me, they honored me. I came with my grandfather, I came with my father, and I learned how to speak and be heard, even though they were so much older than me. And I also learned how to listen deeply and with curiosity, and to ask them questions that they love to answer. So, therefore, I do have on the next slide the punchline about resilience. So the early childhood was in the world of men that I just described, and I went, with my father everywhere. I learned how to use tools, which came in very handy when I was building my lab and everything else. My mom, though, she left high school to be a partisan and fight in the front line at the end of the Second World War. So she did actually fought the Nazis weapons in hand. She wasn't just helping in a hospital. And her mom was a teacher and a widower and a grandmother who was so rare because she had her own retirement money. So that grandmother never remarried. She started to work as a teacher. She took care of her children during the war and through the rest of it. And my sister and I were blessed. We lived in Europe when we believed that there would not be another war, but then there was one that made my former country, former Yugoslavia, disintegrate in the 90s. So my sister was the good child and the straight A student. She graduated from college in electrical engineering, and then at UWM did a PhD in education later in life. Since the good child role was taken, I had to be different. So I was the rebellious child, but I also was a straight A student. So lessons learned from early childhood, and kind of coming to your questions. Adversity, if you overcome it, can help you with resilience. And if you have resilience, no matter where you got it, that can help you to survive in STEM and help you to succeed in STEM. So in many ways, my father and grandfather prepared me to succeed in the world of males and to be the only female in my graduate programs in Australia and in the United States, to be the first woman faculty here in Milwaukee, to be the first woman dean. They prepared me for that by taking me to along as where people took their voice. My mother and my grandmothers also prepared me to succeed because they were women that everybody respected. They were women who survived major wars, buried children when their husbands died or their husbands were imprisoned, and everybody treated them with utmost respect. So from them, I learned that I can know that women are important, independent, that a girl is just as good as a boy, that I need to fight for my equality, and that I can become what I want to be. I also had a cherry tree and a vineyard. I did stomp the grapes and helped my grandparents make wine. I sat in my cherry tree and was thinking and dreaming things that helped me be a scientist. I was jumping on my grandparents' roof and from roof to roof. And I was also social at the same time. So being both alone and together helps you to be a scientist. What can you do? You already are supporting a lot of programs, but supporting outreach programs to preschool and elementary school children from women scientists, women STEMers can be very important to see those role models early, to support the visibility of the STEM female role models, both in families and in K-4, and to advocate for STEM related field trips. I think those are very tangible advices that I have. All right, and outreach, you already talked about Discovery World, and I thought there would be many scientists from Milwaukee because of course we have 4 major universities and we do so much research at UWM, at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and also at Marquette University, and MSOE is starting to do more and more, and Concordia and so forth. And it turns out that I was the only one. Why? All of us in science are so busy that even when we want to do outreach, we end up not doing it because we're so busy. So Ellen and the writer of Discovery World, this is the other picture. If it wasn't for the 2 of them, I also would not have been a hero of science because I would not have had the time to prepare all of that stuff that went there. So we're thinking of writing a book when I retire based on the interviews we did there. This is my high school graduation. So middle and high school, the sepia stuff. The lessons that I learned here is that the STEM subjects in schools and how we go about them, it's very cultural. It's not the same throughout the planet. So where I was growing up, we were using the continental European system, and very German, very French, that was the model. And I ended up having physics for 6 years. It was mandatory, 2 years in middle school, 4 years in high school, 12 semesters of physics before college, okay? And I discovered that I like physics thanks to an amazing teacher I had in middle school who was doing all these demos and science movies, and she was so smart and funny. And then also when I heard the Bohemian Rhapsody in high school by Queen and read up the bios of the group members, and Brian May was already done with his physics undergraduate degree and was already doing a bachelor's, a PhD in physics in England. And I was the kid that loved rock music and loved opera at the same time, and the Bohemian Rhapsody had it all in there for me. So sometimes small things can become important. Now, in the United States, I experienced K-12 through my son. And I watched it, therefore, at a very different periods, the zeros and the tens, or the tens and the 20s, actually. No, I don't know. Anyway, he graduated from high school in 2015. So physics is optional. Somebody can graduate from high school without a single course in physics, and they can be a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. The fear of math that for some reason we are throwing at our children of both gender, and I watched that happening in front of my own eyes, is what also keeps many of our students away from the physical sciences. Biology is much better. You can still do it without as much math, and girls are gravitating towards the life sciences. So if you want to see girls in STEM, you put the word bio in front of whatever. And right now we're starting bioengineering in engineering, and finally we're seeing female students in engineering. And then there is that thing about the coolness, the popularity, the nerdiness, the geekiness, those stereotypes. We were talking about Dr. Goofy and Dr. Evil, but then in school, when you're that age, you're much more, are you going to be the popular and the cool kid, or are you going to be the nerd and the geek? So I was lucky that I was going through school at the time when if you were a girl, you were popular and cool. If you were straight A, and were rebellious and listened to rock music and dressed and all that other stuff. So support children to build STEM competencies. ask school boards to make more of the fundamental STEM courses mandatory, lobby for that, and lobby for a cadre of teachers who have more extensive STEM preparation in addition to the pedagogy and the other things that one gets steeped into schools of education. And the reason why I'm dwelling on this period is because I did hear that that's something that is of interest. Now, why am I not able to go forward on my, okay, yeah, so there we go. I use this in my dean interview because the notion is that if somebody drops out of a PhD, is that always a sign that they just couldn't get it? And I use the same Brian May from Queen, who is still touring around with the amazing music that we know. And he actually, after Queen was done, he went back and finished his PhD. He even served as a chancellor of the University in Manchester, a physicist. So interesting stories. Okay. Now, college years, this is my college graduation picture. We started with 50 male and 50 female in the class of freshmen at the beginning. More of the females finished than the male. It is a tough course. We had 4 years of physics, 4 years of math and theoretical physics, and 1 year of chemistry. And that's that. We also had a course of English. And I ended up being best in class for my group and also best in class for 10 years of people who graduated. So that opened some opportunities for me. One of the opportunities was to have an undergraduate research experience in Grenoble. And now social science has shown that one way to keep people in STEM and have them work with their college degrees in STEM jobs or continue on to graduate programs in STEM is to give them a research experience, to have them taste that feeling, that virus. You're working on something where the answer is not at the back of a book. So I got that feeling in France, in Grenoble. I worked with a professor who still to his day, his book on atomic physics is being sold and was used in Australia. His PhD advisor had a Nobel Prize on gas lasers. And so I got to be like a granddaughter of a PhD Nobel Prize winner because my advisor, he also had a reputation in that town, which is all about physics and skiing, two things that I love. Jean-Claude Pepe-Perula, if you said that that was your professor, they all pitied you. They said he eats students alive, he throws them out the window. He was the most amazing professor. I learned so much from him. I worked so well with him. Of course, I didn't know a word of French, and I went to learn French immediately after this. So he would say, Marie, we shall do the measurement. And then because he said Marie, I thought he was speaking to me and was trying to interpret. I met my husband in the French course after that research experience. I signed up to learn French, and marriage is another really important thing about whether you will continue or not. This is the pipeline and the places where you can leak out of the pipeline. So I added Josifovsky, really Josifovska, to my name Gajdardziska because I was the boy, so I kept the name. So that's how I have this long, unpronounceable name. My husband is a very important partner in my life. He made choices that he'll have one partner for life, that's me, that one career per family is enough, and that it will be my career, not his. He is an electrical engineer and computer scientist, and so he was my equivalent of a physicist guy marrying a woman who is a nurse. You can find a job any place for an IT degree holder and an expert. So we were able to travel the world together. We parent together, we do housework together. We traveled for me to do the master's and PhD in Australia and in Arizona. And he's supporting me as a faculty dean and in my startup work. And we finally managed to become parents 14 years after we were married. Our son is 23 and right now lives in Berkeley, California. And our Titanic movie is from Cape Town, South Africa, which is where I got the Ruth Bader Ginsburg color. So this is Sydney, Australia. This is where I did my, I received an Australian European Graduate Award, one per year for all of Europe, and I got it. And if you're speaking of imposter syndrome, I still feel that there must have been some error. Of the entire continent, I got it. It's crazy. So anyway, in some ways it helps you gain confidence. In other ways, you're like, oh my God, they'll really find out that I know nothing. So France was good for my self-confidence. Australia was good too. I worked on solar energy, something that I could talk to my neighbors about, because even though I couldn't talk about the exact physics of what I was doing, you know, I could point to the solar devices on the rooftops and they said, oh, you're working on that problem. That's an important problem, alternative energy. So energy has always been important to me. This is my Perfume in the School of Physics title. That will be the title of the book if we ever write it with Ellen and Ryan from Discovery World. And this happened, this is the farewell party for me leaving Australia. I was asked to stay and convert into a PhD program with full funding. My husband and I were homesick. We went back home and this was the farewell party. The women that you see in this picture are the secretaries. There was only one other graduate student who was a woman in the entire School of Physics that had 7 departments. This is 1/7 of the school and the 7 secretaries of each department. My advisor was very popular with the other departments, and so they came for my farewell, and also one of the few women. Then we went back to Macedonia, and from there went to Arizona, and I did my PhD in physics. This is my PhD advisor. So that's kind of like your scientific father. So, you know, he's just as important in my life as my grandfather and my father were. And of course, as my mother and my grandmothers were. He, a very smart man, Australian, he grew up on a farm. He did his PhD at MIT and then was a faculty in Australia and was recruited as a star hire in Arizona. And he built a national center for atomic resolution electron microscopy. He and his postdoc did the very first images of atoms using electrons. So it was so important, so foundational, opened the door to a lot of different research. And so I was kind of like in the mecca of electron microscopy. The entire planet was coming to talk to John Cowley. And I got to talk to all these people because I was a PhD student of John Cowley. He had 12 PhD students and 4 postdocs. And in that group of 14, I was the only woman. And we had one other guy, Peter. We were the only Europeans, so one Macedonian, one Scottish. We're still talking about who invented the bagpipes because Gajdardziska means a bagpiper. That's one of my last name. And Joseph and Maria, you know, that doesn't need any explanation. The first name and my husband's name. So John Cowley had a smart woman, a smart daughter. I was always picking my advisors to be much older than me so that you never have to deal with potential romantic entanglements. I also pick them to be supportive of women. And you know, based on how a man talks about his wife, how a man talks about his daughter, or any of the other women in a department, either employees or students, you can say who is a sexist and who isn't. So I was very, very careful about who I was picking. By the time I moved to my postdoctoral advisor, David Smith, actually did have an affair with my best friend, Molly McCartney, his PhD student. They both divorced their spouses and they're still together in these joint families of theirs. And so there were so many gender bias stories that I don't want to go there. It will be depressing to recount them. The main issue is that I survived them and they gave me even more resilience. So what I learned in childhood helped me with all this gender nonsense. And did I tell you the story about the perfume in the School of Physics? I didn't. So in Sydney, we had tea, morning and afternoon. We had butlers in the School of Physics. We had tea from China cups, and we had cookies. And my advisor told me, even if it looks like a waste of time, I have to go at least once a day to the tea, because that's where you get to talk to people. So you go in there, right? They're all guys. There wasn't a single woman on the faculty in all 7 departments, right? And so, okay, I sit there and I make friends, and people are really nice to me. Most of the guys are all really nice, both faculty and other graduate students, but they're always jerks. So one of those jerks just comes back from Cambridge, where he was on some study, and he walks in and he sees me at the table, and he comes by and he says, "A perfume in the School of Physics," as if I had killed somebody. You know, he had such disgust on his face, in his voice, because I was always wearing a perfume, and I still do. I never leave the house without a perfume. And sometimes you go home and say, I should have said this and I should have said that. But I said the right thing. I just looked him straight in the eye and I said, "And why not?" And he didn't have, he was speechless, and he walked away, never said a word to me for the rest of the year when I was there, and I didn't care. So let's go now back to UWM. I got to build my own lab, my own atomic resolution microscope. And when my kid in K4 had to say what your mom does, he says, "My mom sees atoms." That was the beginning of his college essay. "My mom sees atoms." So that's my microscope. I tried to look like a nerd. For longest time, I tried to kind of look like a man, not do the feminine things. And then I said, you know, forget it. I am who I am. And so this picture down here is me and my colleague, the 2 of us that started a company together. So we also got our own child, 14 years of unexplained infertility. You know what that can do to a woman and to a marriage, and we survived that as well, just like we survived moving to 2 other continents and going through graduate school. My husband did his master's when I was a postdoc, so then I could support him, and we were getting tuition breaks. He worked for ASU when I was a PhD, so I was getting tuition breaks. So this is our child, and this is Ireland. We love to travel with our friends from graduate school. And now I get to give PhDs. I have my own PhD students who have PhDs with me on research, but as a dean of the graduate school, this is my happiest moment, convocations. I'm so sad they're online right now. And now I also have a startup together with Carol. And of course, there is a lot of work and a lot of serious stuff, but we also have fun. You know, if you have a boring life, your science cannot be interesting. Boring life, boring science, interesting life, interesting science. So, so Carol and I, we have our foundational patent for graphene monoxide, the first solid form of carbon monoxide on the planet that is stable at atmospheric temperatures and pressures. And we have now made enough of it. We're putting in batteries and testing them. And these batteries are really superior. They can charge 10 times faster. Imagine charging your electric car, not overnight, but while you're having a snack or a drink or a short lunch. And of course, anything else that we have with batteries. And now I'm close to the end. I took the closing thing from, I didn't have a business when I was given a Woman of Influence by the Business Journal in innovation, and also because I was a dean of a graduate school, and a graduate school is all about innovation. And then the next year they asked me to give a keynote. I'm like, me, the physicist, the keynote to a room full of 1,000 people, you know, very, very posh, very formal. So I did a keynote, and Ellen helped me again. And a good friend who is a writer. And so let me just end with this. Yes, my chosen academic field is physics, which for years and has been only male, and in many countries it still is. So a few women in the field succeed, and they do that by trying to mimic male appearances and male behaviors. And I did that too. You first have to establish yourself, just like my grandmothers. You first have to survive and people have to respect you, then you can do it your way, right? So in the beginning, drab lab look, no hint of femininity, geeky humor, if any, serious, laser focus, work, 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 no skiing, no books, nothing, no partying. But the world is changing, not fast enough. And I've learned to navigate this sea of gender bias, perfume and all, and to reach some exalted shores. I have lots of wounds. I can talk to people privately about that. I don't want to talk about the difficult things too much because we want to encourage people, and not in a phony way. I'm still honest because I survived all those difficult things. So if I could, anybody else can. And so I am working with all the students, male and female, to support them at UWM. I always tell the female students in physics that if they ever need to talk with me as a woman, even if I'm not their main advisor, that my door is always open to them. I have one now that is a postdoc at the Berkeley National Lab, and I was not her major advisor, but half of the acknowledgement was dedicated to me. And she told me that she would have killed herself if I did not save her, because she was so down at one moment in her PhD story. So anyway, we can talk about all of these things forever. Don't ask me about budgets. We're cutting them, not today. And I think that I hope that this is the end of my long presentation. We used to do lunch and learn, and we'll do it again. To tell people what we do in with graduate students and with graduate programs. We're doing this online right now. You can email me or you can email Ellen if you want to, and we have students speak about what they do. And we also fundraise to support graduate students. Graduate students, even if they had a Pell Grant as undergraduates, when you're a graduate student, you only have unsubsidized loans, nothing else. That's the only thing that's available from you, no matter how financially needy you are, no matter what is the socioeconomic status of your family, and that's the only thing you can get. And if you're an international student, then you cannot get even an unsubsidized loan. So anything we can do to support our students, I would take your advice on that, because I know you're very successful in fundraising for all the activities that you just talked about. So I'm going to now escape this screen, hopefully. And here I am. I'm alive. I'm 62.
Dean GJ.
Maria.
I'm glad I'm not trying to pronounce your full name.
Just Maria.
Absolutely brilliant, very, very engaging presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was certainly very, very inspirational. What I particularly enjoyed is, we think of research and we think it's tedious and boring and I don't want to do research. You upended that by talking about the thrill and the privilege to work on a question that no one knows the answer to. How cool is that? I mean, it just totally gives you, reframes research. I never thought that I would meet a physicist with so much brilliance, intellect, style, and a delightful sense of humor. You are charming. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. I see that we have a number of very, very interesting questions in our chat field. So I'm going to ask Lisa to start to field some of the questions for you. Lisa?
So thank you so much for your presentation. It was awesome. So I'm going to start with one question is, you've described a lot of different roles that you play. How do you possibly manage all of the different ones? And is there a particular role that you kind of stands out as your favorite?
Yeah, I think that I think in academia, and also anybody with a university degree who gets a career, male or female, and on top of it, if we have families, we all have to learn how to multitask. And so once you learn how to multitask, it's not ideal. I mean, I was much better when I could just do the one thing as a graduate student or as a postdoc, and then have fun with my friends and party, right? But multitasking is number one. Number two is when I got my son, I had to, like every woman in the United States, because we do not have the system that helps us with childcare. I had to also consider, should I stay home or not? And I think the fact that my mom was working when I was very little, and then she retired while I was still in school, I had that as an example. And she was always saying, oh, I made a mistake that I retired. I should have continued working. And the fact that my grandmothers were who they were, I figured if they could do it, I can do it. Because it takes so long to get that PhD and postdoc and then an assistant professorship and to fight for tenure and get it, that to give that, the opinion in the world of physics is that we are on a fast lane. The actual funding agency that we compete with everybody in the nation to get money for our research, the portal is called Fast Lane. And the notion is this lane is moving so fast. So for you to publish anything, of course, it has to be for the first time on the planet. It cannot be for the first time in Milwaukee. And for that, you got to move fast. You got to stay on top of your game. And if you step off that lane to be a stay-at-home mom, then you will never be able to run fast to be able to jump on this fast-moving thing. So that for me, if I had made that decision, I already knew enough about academia that I knew that it would be a one-way ticket, that there is no return. So then what happened is really interesting, is that because as a faculty, you don't have a boss. Your department chair is not your boss. Your dean is not your boss. Your provost, your chancellor, they're not your bosses because you fundraise for everything you do, right? You don't get the money for your research from your bosses. So you don't report to them. You write the annual report of what you accomplished in that year. That's your bragging. You brag about all your accomplishment in a year. And then I figured, you know, I can do that while I'm nursing at 2 a.m. I can be reviewing a paper, or I can do a few paragraphs of the next paper, you know, while my kid is napping. And I can have group meetings where my group comes to my house while I'm still nursing. And so, and then the other thing that happened is, and I know I'm going too long on this, but I'll wrap it up, is having a child is fabulous for women because it not only that it forces us to multitask, but it forces us to be smart at multitasking. Because there is always too much to do for 24 hours in 7 days. We have to make choices. And so I apply that to my own academic work and to my own leadership work. I'm constantly making choices, and I'm constantly making the choices to go for the important questions, for the interesting questions, for the initiatives that will have a big payoff rather than some small thing that will be a lot of work and then at the end will be so what? So in a sense, having a kid forces you to not just work hard, but also to work very, very smart. So that's what I learned.
That's great.
Yeah.
The next question is about imposter syndrome. How pervasive would you say imposter syndrome is for women in the STEM field? And could you talk a little bit more about your experience and how you overcame that?
Yeah, I think the imposter syndrome is something that it can kick in at any time. Right, so you can be perfectly fine and not have it, and then suddenly it can kick in, and then you have to work on it, and you either leak out of the pipeline because you cannot resolve it, or you resolve it and you stay on. And so for me, I think the first time was when I went to France. You know, I'm from tiny little Macedonia. Will I be able to do anything here? And the fact that and then on top of it, I was working with a professor who had the most terrible reputation in the physics community, and this place had like 4 major national labs on physics, Grenoble, And at every party, everybody knew every physicist in town, and they would ask you who you're working with. So that was the first time I had it. And the fact that I walked away from Grenoble with high praise from Pepe Perula, and a glowing letter of recommendation that went to my professor in Macedonia, who had gotten his bachelor's there before, long time before. That was the first time I had it and I overcame it. Then in Australia, I think that the fact that France kind of gave me a vaccine, so I survived Australia. Then the next time it kicks in is I'm with my PhD advisor, who actually is a great guy, but in my group, we have out of the, what did I say, 12 graduate students and 4 postdocs. He had so much grant money. He was such a major name in the field that he had boatloads of money and can pay 16 of us to do research in his labs. And so my colleagues, apart from me and Peter, my Scottish friend, we had a friend from Nigeria, Godfrey, and then the other 13 were, one from Taiwan, 12 from mainland China. They were from mainland China at the time, this is before Tiananmen, when they were handpicked by the Communist Party and sent to Japan, Western Europe, United States to learn how to build the science enterprise and the engineering enterprise. And these guys were the best of 1 billion people. So that imposter syndrome kicked in again, because now not only am I from tiny Macedonia, but yeah, France is big. Australia is a continent, but there are only 20 million people, same as in the former Yugoslavia. And now in my own group, I'm competing with these guys who were chosen out of 1 billion people. And boy, did they work. And boy, did they ask me what I'm doing, and I would tell them, and then I would ask them what they're doing, and they would say, oh, something, and walk away. And boy, did one of them steal my results and present them at his. And he's a director of a microscopy lab at one of the most premier Ivy in physics in our nation. And that premier Ivy asked me to evaluate him on whether they should give him tenure, whether they should keep him. And I had to decide, what am I going to do, right? And he knew what he did, because he presented it at a group meeting, but he didn't publish it. I published it. So I figured, and he also knew that he couldn't compete with the other guys. He was the only one in that whole group when his mother and father were from the upper echelons in China, both academics, and he was the golden boy, but he was essentially, you know, he got the ticket through connections, and he knew that he was not as good as the others. So anyway, I think that that's like where you get your imposter syndromes and then you overcome them. The next time it kicked in, it was in midlife. So I had it 3 times in my life.
That's a good lesson in karma and a reminder to always do the right thing.
Yeah.
I
I gave him a good recommendation.
Yeah.
I gave him a good recommendation, and we're still talking to each other at conferences.
Okay. Then switching gears a little bit, how do you think the teaching of STEM can better include and support women to include more women in the field in the future?
And I think there are 2 ways. One is to have more women who are the professors of physics, and for that to be normalized. There is a little story. There is somebody who was a graduate student in Holland when I was already tenured, and so I gave her compliments about her talk. I knew her PhD advisor. He also is a big name in my field, who is close to my advisor. And she had remembered that. I told her she has what it takes to be a faculty in physics. And then we see each other 10 years later, not so long ago, and she now is a mother and has a boy and a girl, and she's now tenured, and she's making decisions and building her group and all that, the stuff that I was doing. And she told me something really interesting. She said that her son had asked her, "Mom, are boys allowed to be professors of physics?" So having more of us. And then the other one is to make the subject matter more relevant to not just women, but modern day men. Because honestly, we don't have enough graduate students from the United States who are pursuing chemistry, physics, and engineering. We do rely on international students a lot to fill our spots. So we need to make it exciting. We need to make it really relevant. There is one phrase from the Dean of the Graduate School at MIT who said that our PhD students used to come before to graduate school because of what they wanted to become, what title they wanted to get. And now they're coming to us because they want to help solve some problem that the planet is facing. So I think that's how we can get the young ones in STEM, by putting the big problems and the big opportunities and showing how STEM helps with that. I think that's, and then for the girls, you know, how every girl can say, I want to be a vet, and you can have the love towards your animal and towards your pet as your expression of being a scientist. So I think in the biosciences, the latest Nobel Prize went to women for the CRISP. So those are the ways.
So does UW-Milwaukee have programs for like K through 12 girls in the STEM field that you're aware of?
Yeah, we have one of our programs that is doing really well is Girls That Code. It's very popular. It's the computer science department. I served for quite a while as a board member on the Wisconsin Science and Engineering Fair. And we also ran the Badger State Science Fair at UWM. We support research as mentors so that students can go to local and state competition, the Badger Fair, and then go to the Intel Fair. Those are some examples. And then we also do outreach. There are some of us who are very passionate about outreach. So we go to the schools, or the kids come to us. We also have college for kids. In summer, for very little money, you can sign up your kid. And it's also, you know, if you're working, it's great once COVID is over. And you can get many really cool subjects, you know, cryptography, philosophy, whatever you want. There is a lot of really interesting stuff.
And then how did you get connected with Carol to begin your company?
So Carol, when I was hired, I told you I was the first woman in physics. And then we had the Sputnik generation retiring, and the economy wasn't doing too well in the early 90s. So we were losing people without being able to hire. And finally, we were approved to hire, and we advertised in a broad field of what we call condensed matter physics or solid state science. You know, anything that is in your computer, I know the people who invented that. They go to my conferences. Any memory device, stuff like that. So we advertised, and we had 250 applicants. And now I was on the committee that was searching and screening. Carol was one of the applicants. And I thought, oh my God, you know, 250 pounds to read through. Hopefully I can throw a bunch of them. No, I could only take 10 away. All the others were really, really solid applicants. And it came to a point where you are like a Hollywood person, where you're kind of you're doing all this, you're looking for that star power. So Carol was in the top 5 that we were going to interview. And now my male colleagues are saying, oh, let's put guy number 6 on that list, and let's get Carol out of that list and ask the deans for more money to interview her as a woman. And I'm on the search and screen committee, and I'm a woman. The guys, it's really interesting in physics. I went to lunch all the time, and they were talking about the war of the women in physics. There was some secretarial groups, and there was some friction in physics. And they were talking about the war of the women in physics in front of me, completely kind of just like my father and grandfather, completely ignoring that I'm a woman, over the head. So anyway, so my guy colleagues are saying, hey, let's take her out of this 5 and ask for more money to bring her as a number 6. And I'm like, no way, she earned her spot in the top 5. We're not doing that. They looked at me and they couldn't make an argument. So we brought her and she ended up being the number 1 choice. So she earned it fair and square, just like I earned mine fair and square. So she became woman number 2. And now we're 4 of us in the physics department. When I was hired, we were criticized. Every 10 years, you get a review of your graduate programs, and we were in undergraduate programs. We were criticized for a chilly climate for our female students. And then, you know, here we are now 4 women. I mean, still out of 20 people, it's still nowhere close to half. But we are now among the top 7 and 6 programs in the nation, PhD programs for diversity and for gender equity. Isn't it pathetic? I mean, it's heartwarming, but it's pathetic at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So how did you decide to stay in the United States?
That was very interesting. So the original plan we had is that I was going to do research for a year. I got an exchange program for a year fellowship. And this is why I chose Tempe, Arizona, because Tempe and Skopje and Macedonia are sister cities. We both had jobs in Macedonia, so to get leaves of absence would help to go to a sister city where there is an established connection. And then it turned out that the American candidate wanted to do something that was very politically sensitive. So my university in Macedonia rejected that candidate, asked for another one. And so then the ASU side said, well, if you're rejecting our candidate, we're rejecting your candidate. So after everything was approved for me, right, this ends up being complicated on tables that I'm not sitting at. And so anyway, long story short, the physics department gave me an assistantship. And that's how I ended up doing my whole PhD rather than coming for only 1 year to do research and go back to Macedonia to do more research there and defend my PhD there. So I stay and do my PhD. Our plan was then to do a postdoc in Switzerland, south of France or south of Germany, so that we can be back home and then have a lab for me where I can go in the summer to do research, because you need a lot of money for what I'm doing. And then what happened is the year when I defended my PhD, 1991, Slovenia seceded from the former Yugoslavia, and the next year Croatia and Bosnia, and those wars were really horrible. And Macedonia seceded without a war. And that kind of essentially made it difficult for me to go back and be able to continue. Because you couldn't travel, there were embargoes, and I had a postdoc offer and then a faculty offer, and so life happened. Essentially, there was an original plan, and then there was history, and there are lots of opportunities in the United States for research. And it's really interesting. One of my best friends, another Marija, who is also a physicist, she's at USC in California. Right now, she's in China. China is giving her so much money. She became an earthquake engineer, is a leader in earthquake engineering. And so right now there is more money in China for research than there is money in the United States. So this Macedonian woman physicist with her husband in California and her son in Minnesota studying, she's in China. She's now at home because of the COVID. But the world is constantly moving and changing. You can never, I come from Macedonia where a celebrity and was the celebrity figures, Alexander the Great and Cleopatra, one was 2,300 years ago, the other one 2,000 years ago. And nothing really very notable happened since then. So you can be the first empire on the planet, and every next military leader wants to come to your grave, like Caesar and whoever else, and Napoleon. They all went to Egypt to go to his grave, and because they're the next Alexanders. But you cannot be a superpower forever.
That's true.
So that's the other part.
So how do you stay at the top of your game?
So one of the ways you can stay at the top of the game is for you to invent the game. And so that's the other way, is when you have a child and if you are a dean, you cannot be in a busy field where there are many people working. So right now, graphene monoxide, we're the only ones on the planet that know how to make it, Carol and I and the people working with us. And we own the patent for composition of matter. And it's essentially, if you're working in something that is busy, where lots of people are working and they have lots of resources and large groups, you cannot compete in that. You can still be relevant and you can still be in the game if you name the game, if you control the game, if you invent the game. Essentially, you invent a new game and you are the one who holds all the rules. So that's how you can do it. And I think I should retire eventually so I can do the company full time. And then join you guys for Mahjong. I love Mahjong.
So one last question. We are looking for some advice about recent books you've read, fiction or nonfiction, anything you would recommend?
Oh, yeah. Do you use Libby? Libby is the best. I get books from the library. All right, so believe it or not, there is a book, 7 Brief Lessons of Physics by an Italian writer, Carlo Rovelli. That was the last one I read. It was beautiful. Not a single equation, written in a most beautiful way, most philosophical way, and very easy to read. White Fragility, I recommended, by Robin DiAngelo. That's another one I read recently. Then I also love history fiction, like all the Hilary Mantel books. Wolf Hall, Bring Up the Bodies, The Light and the Mirror. Most recently, I read Elizabeth Chadwick. This is about Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was a queen in her own right and also queen in England. Katharine Hepburn is playing her in Lion in Winter. So that's a trilogy, really excellent. Then for around New Year's, I saw Romeo and Juliet again from Buzz Luhrmann and thought that how come I've never seen a King Lear? So then I just downloaded it and read King Lear. Something else that I like a lot, and I think this is where my thing ends. There is a woman Nobel Prize winner in literature called Svetlana Alexievich. She's from Belarus, and the Chernobyl Diaries, that HBO series, is based on her book. When I read her book about women in the Second World War, and I've read 3 of her books, and they're all amazing. She's a journalist. She interviews people, but then she puts their words in books in the most amazing curated way that you feel like you're reading something new that you've never read. Enchantress of Numbers was good. This is about Ada, the daughter of Byron, who is the first woman programmer. There is a language after her that was very good as well. Enchantress of Numbers. And then I've been going through a major Haruki Murakami phase. So I've read a whole bunch of his books, and I read a whole bunch of, I read Beloved and a bunch of this summer. So anyway, I read like crazy. I love reading.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your presentation and answering all of our questions. And I'm just amazed by all the different areas of your interest and intellect. And we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you so much for doing an outstanding job of tracking all those questions and fielding them to the dean. It was just an amazing. I had no idea there would be so many takeaways from a physicist. So many things to take away. And I think that your last one, and I saw several comments in the chat, of when someone asks you, how do you maintain the top of your game? And your answer was so simplistic. You invent your game.
Yeah.
You make your rules. You
Yes.
know, you call your own shots. That is just so brilliant. And it's just such a good message for women in STEM, for women in all walks of life to hear. So, you know, thank you for your time and for your for sharing your wisdom and your certainly your history and your richness of your background. It was an absolute joy. And just as a reminder, there was a slide in our slide bank tonight of registering for a picture of a scientist. It's a very good segue and it will complement tonight's talk. It's a virtual screening. And I believe that Carol was going to send out an email blast, but just to go over that again, it's AAUW Milwaukee is going to have a virtual screening and a discussion of a picture of a scientist. And it's a documentary that chronicles the stories of 3 women scientists. It certainly could have been the dean that spoke tonight as one of those, and the barriers that they faced of working in STEM. So the virtual screening is February 8th to the 11th, and there'll be a panel discussion on February 11th from 7 to 8. We will definitely have that information posted on our website, along with that we have recorded tonight's just fascinating, absolutely fascinating presentation that will also be available on our website.